Eritu ano to obunaru fata aniro anna fatadam. Eritu ano to obunaru fata aniro anna fatadam.
We had seen our first death in Wabaku. My wife sat with the family and watched him as Arabmat slowly died. And Lakin was collecting these traumatic memories like hole punches in a membership card. She sat and wept with the family, and then she came home. To us and to our mission doctor, the cause of Arabmat's death was clear: liver failure. But to our Wabaku friends, it was equally as clear. Arabmat died because an evil spirit shot him with an invisible arrow, the same way that everybody dies. We had already learned, in the Wabaku mind, somebody is always to blame for a death. But who angered the spirits? Or who hired the sorcerer to send the evil spirit to kill him? We waited in nervous anticipation to see what would happen next. How did they decide who's to blame? And once they blame somebody, well, then what? The morning after Arabmat's death, a large group of people were underneath of his house. There was yelling, commotion, obvious tension. I grabbed my notebook and my pen, eager not to miss any valuable cultural moments that would teach me about the Wabaku worldview. But what was recently a little mosquito bite on my left shin was now an infected sore, and my attempts to lance it had left it an open wound. It was all wrapped up, but it was difficult to put any weight on it because the infection had already worked down deep. So I grabbed my walking stick and I headed out the door. I was leaning heavily on my walking stick, mostly hopping on one leg, over to the meeting of Arabmat's angry family. As I approached slowly, Arabmat's brother, Boni, was yelling in the middle of the crowd, looking around and pointing at everybody. He held his bow and arrow in one hand and was shouting through tears. His face also was painted black with ash from a fire. He looked pretty terrifying. As I reached the crowd, I sat down in the back under the nearest house, taking the pressure off of my throbbing leg, trying to just sit in the back and silently observe. But what I heard next made my blood run cold. I heard my name, Dibiate Due, being shouted from Boni's mouth. I looked up to see that he had strung an arrow in his bow, and he was pointing it directly at me. I couldn't understand most of what he was yelling at me, but I understood two things he was yelling: Dibiate Due and Guillamon. Dibiate Due was my name. Guillamon means liar. I tried to stoically hold his angry gaze and listen, but I was watching his hands. His arrow was strong, pointed at me, but he hadn't yet pulled it back to shoot. My head went fuzzy and I realized, I need to get out of here quick. But running was not an option. I could only hop on one foot. I stood up, and then there was a break in Boni's yelling, so I turned and decided to respond. I thought maybe playing the foreigner card would get me out of this. So I said, Mo atin oma yayamam. Amo oraima moniasi ebreweni. I don't understand what you're saying. Why are you angry at me? He began yelling his answer in reply, but I could understand none of it. His bow and arrow were still pointed at me, and I decided now I needed to leave. I was sitting near the ladder of a house, so I slowly climbed the ladder and hid inside the house as he continued shouting at me. Maybe out of sight, I thought he would point that thing at someone else. I climbed up and sat down in the neighbor's house underneath of their window, so Boni didn't have a clear shot at me. He went on yelling, and I couldn't understand any of it. Then after a while, I heard him start shouting my name again. And then there was silence. He was calling to me. He was waiting for me to respond. And just then I had a choice. Do I stand up in the window and face him or remain hidden? If I popped my head up in the window, he could have already pulled his bowstring, waiting to shoot me. Everyone was sitting in silence, waiting for me to respond. And then, whether brave or stupid, I don't know, I decided to stand up in the window, ready to dodge an arrow. I stood up quickly in the window, but his arrow, still strong, was now pointed at the ground. So I said, Amo monima oraimo asi yebrewom, mo atin abani fia marima tumasi, mo ote bemarore. I don't know why you're angry with me. I tried to help your brother. I gave him medicine. I quickly sat back down, trying to communicate that this conversation was over. Boni continued yelling again, but I didn't hear my name again. And after a minute or so, I decided I needed to get back home. So I hobbled back down the ladder, grabbed my walking stick, and hopped home. I didn't look back, and I remember thinking, Would it still count as martyrdom, even though I made a stupid choice in coming out here? I should have known that they would suspect me for Arabmat's death. I chose not to participate in that handshaking ritual that would have ruled me out for blame for his death. And I really regretted not staying home that day. I was praying as I was hobbling home that I wasn't about to be attacked from behind, because there was no way I could run. I finally made it to the door of my house, went inside, locked it behind me. When I got inside, Lakin was already in tears. She said, I was watching from the window, but all I could hear was Dibiate Due and Guillemon. Yeah, me too, I told her. I don't know what's going on. That day we tried to make flight plans to get out of the village for a while, but the plane couldn't come until the following week. And because of my bravery, I decided I wasn't going to leave the house again until the plane was already on its way. But that night, Wabaku would hold a seance. They would ask Arabmat's dead spirit who was responsible for his murder, and I couldn't miss that. So that night, I did leave the house again, but I'll save that for another story. In order to preemptively defend my friends here in Wabaku, I need to tell you that Boni never intended to shoot me with his arrow. Culturally, he was bound to make a show of force to defend his brother's perceived murder. Boni came to me the next day, apologized, shook my hand, and explained some of this to me. He even told me that he wasn't accusing me of being responsible. Okay, thanks, I told him, but next time could you give me a warning? I couldn't understand what you were yelling at me. I thought you were about to shoot me. He apologized again. Years later, Boni and I still laugh about this story. He loves that I could only hop on one foot, and I thought I had to run from him. When I still had dreadlocks, Boni loved to sit behind me during language sessions and sit and braid my dreads. They're like dried tobacco leaves, he'd say, but they're hanging off of your head. Boni has now heard the gospel, believes it, and just last month he was baptized. He's a brother in Christ and a loyal friend, and even though I didn't know it at the time, and I chose to tell you this story from my perspective, Boni never intended to harm me, and he's apologized many times for making me think so.